We're starting to see the themes that I predicted in my 2026 overview video starting to become more intense. As a reminder, I'll play you a clip of that video right now. And disruption seems to be the name of the game early in the year. The new moon eclipse that happens right before the Aries ingress is near the MC of this Aries ingress chart. It's at the 28th degree of Aquarius on the 5-1 cross of industry and square Uranus, which is still retrograde in Taurus. That eclipse falls on the descendant of the president's chart. This eclipse, along with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which happens immediately after, suggests sudden fractures and revolutions within organizations, businesses, and even the monetary system, especially cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Some astrologers say eclipse energy has a 3 to 6 month window of influence before and after an eclipse. One such disruption that seems to have already started is at the Heritage Foundation. The organization was founded in 1973 when the sun was at 27 degrees of Aquarius. So I'll come back to the Heritage Foundation. First, let's go deeper into the themes of this eclipse. The first thing that you'll notice is that the eclipse is right on the ascendant of the chart located in Washington, D.C., and it's in a square aspect to Uranus in the third house. Now, if you know about the Sibley chart, you'll notice that this eclipse is also aspecting the moon of the Sibley chart, which is in the third house, and it's in square to Uranus, which sits in the sixth house. So what this means is that this eclipse is powerfully impacting the country as a whole, with a focus on the people related to a disruption of third house themes, the media, all forms of communication, including free speech and the freedom of assembly, voting rights, the internet, including information technologies like AI. Like I mentioned, the eclipse falls on the 5-1 cross of industry, connecting this sixth house in the Sibley chart, which is about workers and trade unions. And Pluto has been transiting the Sibley second house since 2016. Ironically, the last time Trump was in office. The second house is about our monetary system and the stock exchange. We experienced a Pluto return in 2022, and now Pluto is approaching a conjunction with the South Node. So Pluto has really been digging up the themes from our past, our themes of racism and sexism, the themes of the Gilded Age that happened right before the Depression. A lot of people have been comparing this time to that Gilded Age, as well as themes from World War II and Nazi Germany. So we're going to be dealing with these themes for another couple of years at least. And you can see that fractures in the AI narrative and its impact on businesses and the job market have already started to play out. There have been multiple media reports that the job market hasn't been this bad since 2009, the year after the 2008 market crash. And we haven't even experienced a market crash yet. But that's because of the AI bubble, which has acted as a veil, Neptune in Pisces, to the pretty dire reality on the ground, or Saturn in Pisces. But the bubble or the mirage is starting to show signs of bursting. That's when Neptune went into Aries and will become even more apparent as Saturn enters Aries on February the 13th. And on that day, the moon, which symbolizes the people, is here in Capricorn on the cusp of the second. And Capricorn is the sign of the moon's fall. And here it is opposing Jupiter. It's at the mercy of the elites to access resources. And Capricorn is about austerity. It can be very depressing. There can be a lot of responsibility that weighs the people down during this time. And Saturn and Neptune are conjunct the cusp of the fourth house. And the fourth house is also symbolic of democracy and the people. What has been termed as the SaaS apocalypse was triggered by a series of moves from Anthropic, an AI company, in early 2026, culminating in a massive market sell-off on February the 3rd. This was the day of the Uranus station. While the seeds were sown earlier, the breaking point was the release of 11 specialized Claude Cowork plugins that directly targeted high margin software sectors. These aren't just minor updates. They are role specific agents for legal, sales, finance, and data analysis. This is pretty much a death knell for a huge swath of tech and information companies. Markets reacted so negatively because now it's not just about the individual. It's going to impact major businesses. And it puts market power into the hands of just a handful of AI companies. And if you don't know who Anthropic is, they were founded by a lot of people who worked at OpenAI. A lot of people actually revolted when Sam Altman was rehired to be the CEO of OpenAI because he had been lying to people. They didn't trust him. He had been seeding a false narrative. So they left that company and started Anthropic. And you'll notice that they have Mercury at 21 degrees of Aquarius. It's in the gate of revolution, gate 49 in human design. And if you'll notice that this founding chart has the full channel of synthesis, which I'll talk about in a minute. In my last video with Dabney Lawless, I spoke about this pattern I noticed with Venus and Mars in the gate of revolution. On the Uranus station, Uranus's ruler Venus was at that 22 degrees of Aquarius in the gate of revolution. And you see here that the whole channel of synthesis is defined. And that was the channel that was defined in Anthropic. And that's why they were in the news. And if you look at the Saturn-Neptune chart, you'll notice that Mars is here right on the midheaven at 22 degrees of Aquarius. So this is a really important degree because Mars is the ruler of Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And you'll notice that when Uranus stationed direct, there were 3 emotional channels connected for the collective. And that's why we saw such a big reaction from the markets, because markets are driven by emotions. They're not driven by logic. Even though people like to pretend that they make decisions from their mind, they don't. They make decisions from their emotions, and then they justify that decision with their mind. And I think that's why a lot of people want to put their trust into AI, because AI doesn't have that emotional connection. And it's kind of hilarious when you think about all of the data that goes into all of our business decisions, this market analysis that goes into the stock market. I mean, why do people waste so much time on the data when we know emotions rule big market moves? Especially these days when the market has been so disconnected from the reality on the ground. You could say that the market already has AI undergirding it, and it does, because AI is basically algorithms. They're basically LLMs. They're not generative AI like they keep talking about. Not yet. They're getting more sophisticated, but they're not quite generative AI. But, AI can only do so much because it doesn't know what it doesn't know. And so when things happen unexpectedly, like last April, when there was this big tariff announcement by Trump, this caught the market by surprise. And so after the big drop, they had to tweak the algorithm. And I think that's why it's been so disconnected from reality, because it doesn't really know what to expect. And so they tweak the algorithm to ignore certain things. And then when Anthropic made this big announcement, that was a shock. And some people reacted very negatively to it, and it ended up driving the sell-off, because when people start to react negatively to things, it's kind of a domino effect, and then it affects the rest of the algorithm. So expect the markets to continue to be volatile. And there are also signs of trouble at a couple of the AI companies who have been burning through a lot of cash. OpenAI and xAI in particular are showing signs of strain as they look for new ways to fund their massive expenses. Access to this energy is very expensive, and they're not profitable, and they have a long runway until they're profitable. And think about it. They're basically sapping out the energy from the rest of us. And it begs the question, why are we investing so much energy into this AI capability, this machine, when it's basically taking away the survival of human beings? Like, why is this worth it? That's what some people are starting to question. All of this energy that's wasted from the loss of jobs, from the loss of companies. We can't even survive anymore because it's being consolidated with these companies who are burning through a lot of cash, burning through our energy in particular. And what is that giving us at the end of the day? It's humans who need to survive. And if we can't survive, what's the point? We're just going to have a whole bunch of machines, having all of this knowledge, and we're all going to die, and just the machines are going to rule the world. It just really doesn't make sense. So you should expect some consolidation in AI companies, because it's just too expensive to have so many AI companies, and there's only a handful. And that further puts the power in just a couple of companies. And that is going to introduce a lot of problems still. On February the 4th, the morning after Uranus stationed direct, this new reality hit the Washington Post as it laid off roughly 300 newspaper employees. Leadership explicitly blamed the rise of generative AI for a massive drop in organic search traffic, which had previously been the paper's primary growth engine. And this has impacted a lot of companies and individuals, because a lot of companies invested money in SEO so that they could be on the first page of Google search results. Google had a monopoly on search. And now Google has been introducing this summary at the top of their search results, so people don't even go to the company's landing pages, especially media companies. So it's basically cannibalizing a lot of individuals and companies' traffic. And this is part of how the monopolies are interacting. It's ending a lot of businesses, kind of like Amazon ended a lot of independent stores, because once you're online and once you have a monopoly, it's really hard to compete. So Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and the owner of the Washington Post, has been facing multiple competitive and legislative challenges to his businesses. And you can see that his decision was partly a defensive move. So you see that we have the Washington Post here on the inner wheel and Jeff Bezos' chart on the outer wheel. And Jeff Bezos has a Venus-Saturn conjunction near that revolutionary degree. Specifically, Saturn at 21 degrees of Aquarius is here in the gate of revolution, gate 49. And his Venus at 24 degrees of Aquarius is actually in gate 30, the gate of fates. And this is where the eclipse will be. And the Washington Post was founded when the North Node was at 24 degrees of Aquarius, also in this gate of fates. Now, as this Venus-Saturn conjunction on the Washington Post North Node suggests, he has brought both benefit and constriction to the Washington Post. He's a pragmatic businessman. And as Yuval Noah Harari points out in this clip,
AI already thinks better than many of us. Therefore, anything made of words will be taken over by AI. If laws are made of words, then AI will take over the legal system. If books are just combinations of words, then AI will take over books. If religion is built from words, then AI will take over religion.
Then there's been the recent sell-off of Bitcoin, which also happened the day after the Uranus station. The cryptocurrency was founded when Neptune was at 22 degrees of Aquarius on that revolutionary degree. And you'll see that Venus was conjunct Neptune, symbolizing the dissolving of value of its cryptocurrency. And even though it started to stabilize, it doesn't look like this wipeout is finished. Mars was on the north node in this chart, and it'll soon conjunct Neptune during the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And Saturn-Neptune is right near the founding chart's moon, which is not a good sign. And also Uranus, when it goes into Gemini, will square Venus, which is also not a good sign. All signs of trouble. Now, the wipeout caught a lot of crypto holders by surprise because so many financial advisors have been suggesting that everyone invest in crypto as a hedge against a drop in the market and the dollar. But it hasn't quite worked out that way. And if you've followed crypto for a while, you'll know that it is full of dark money. I mean, the whole stock market has become essentially a casino, in my opinion. And you know, the house always wins and the suckers always lose. So you'll see that the eclipse falls in that 30th gate that I was talking about. It's in the 5th line, so it's universalizing, and it's connecting to Pluto in gate 41, line 3, which is experimental. It's forming the channel of recognition. And this is an emotional channel, like I mentioned. So it's about the fuel of fantasy versus the gods of fate. And the planets here are fixed to the negative expression or the detriment, they call it. So a lot of people's fantasies are crashing during this eclipse. Many people will get a rude wake-up call, and it's very emotional. Now, I think this video is satire, but it's a great example of the emotional charge of this eclipse. It's shared by Chris Norland, who has some interesting takes on AI, investing, and tech. So I recommend that you check out his channel if you're interested in those topics.
I'm tired of winning. I'm tired of losing all my money. You promised us you made crypto great again. You promised us we'd be rich. The only people that are rich is you and your family, you absolute slime ball. You launched the meme coin. You launched a vaporware crypto that no one wants. You get bribed by all the crypto officials. You pardon criminals to destroy the market. Eric Trump says Q4 would be unbelievable for our banks. Oh, it's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable how much money I've lost. Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., you guys destroyed my life. The only person I would trust is Barron Trump because he's 8 feet tall. Barron, you tell me what to do, because right now, I hate the Trump family!
Now, like I mentioned earlier, we have 2 emotional channels that are connected for the entire collective during this eclipse. The nodes are in the channel of community. That's amplifying the us versus them in the world. It's amplifying the nationalism, not only in our own country, but in countries in reaction to us. Just the other day, there were a lot of booing when Vance and Usha entered the Olympic Stadium in Rome. People are mad. They're angry, and rightfully so. But those are the nodes, basically. That's the environment that we're in. Some positives are that the line that the North Node is in right now is about leadership by example. And so we've seen quite a few people start to stand up to this administration, start to stand up and say, this isn't right. This isn't who we are as a country. There's this other emotional channel, which is the channel of recognition, and this channel is more experiential. So we're at the mercy of the fates right now. So there will be winners and there will be losers. And right now, it looks like there will be a lot more losers, unfortunately. So I love the synchronicities when I hear phrases that have been on my mind, especially with this concept of winners and losers, because the first decan of Aquarius is labeled winners and losers by T. Susan Ching in her books 36 Secrets. It's about the decans and astrology. And so when I heard this phrase being used by Jon Stewart, I just had to clip it. Here it is.
No, I'm saying government always picks winners and losers and then pretends like that's something that they can't do.
The eclipse is implying that we have no control over some of the larger forces at play, especially as it relates to the job market. We have to open ourselves up to see opportunities wherever we can to survive this time period. So now let's talk about Heritage Foundation. Russel Vought, if you don't know him, he's one of the architects of the projects that come from the Heritage Foundation, like Project 2025, and this new project, which is about the American family. And he was in the news on February 5th about the arrest of a person that is accused of plotting to harm him. Now, remember, Mercury squared Uranus on the 6th. So it was leading into this square that this person was arrested. And this person is supposed to appear in court on February the 23rd, very near the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now, Russel Vought's time of birth is unknown, but the noon chart places his moon at that revolutionary degree, 22 degrees of Aquarius. And you see that during the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, Mars will be conjunct his moon. And the Saturn and Neptune conjunction will be right on his Mercury. His Mercury is at 0 degrees of Aries. And this degree is a critical degree. It's called a world point. It's what you become known for. And as we've already seen, his words, his plans, his ideas have become prominently known in the world. The Saturn-Neptune conjunctions have spiritual themes and can incite moral panics or religious extremism. So we can already see the symbolism of this Mars conjuncting his moon play out. He now has U.S. martial protection. Mars conjunct his moon, which is about security. Will he have other events related to this play out near this conjunction? Possibly, but this is a great example of the multiple ways that a chart's themes can play out. You can predict the themes, but not the exact event in my experience. Now, I didn't make it clear in my last video, and I want to make sure I clear up something about the 22nd degree. It's considered a critical or high stakes degree, much like the 0 point of Aries, although the 0 point of Aries is much more important. But this 22 degrees is associated with Capricorn energy. It's symbolizing intense pressure, mastery, and the need for persistence. Now, it can sometimes be referred to as a kill or be killed degree, like I mentioned in my last video. This was a modern theory popularized by the astrologer Nikola Stojanovic, but it's more commonly representative of transformative, intense life themes that require taking personal responsibility and building long-term, consistent success. There are millions of people who have this degree in their chart, after all, so they're not always going to be dealing with assassinations or violence. While you see this theme of violence play out in Russel Vought's chart, it can also symbolize his aggressive focus on implementing the Heritage Foundation project plans. And in my own life, I have seen this play out in multiple ways. I have my sun at 22 degrees of Aquarius in the gate of revolution. And I have been known to cut off relationships to save my own sanity. And I also grew up in a pretty distorted evangelical environment. There was a lot of verbal, emotional, and physical abuse in my environment growing up. In my mid-20s, I had to go no contact with my mother because she was so psychologically damaging to me. And I also am estranged from most of the rest of my family. And while we're on the topic of the Heritage Foundation, I wanted to look at the chart of their most recent project, Saving America by Saving the Family, a foundation for the next 250 years. Now, this project's publication is on the inner wheel of this chart, and Heritage Foundation's founding chart is on the outer wheel. Now, I found it fascinating, this 250 years. I know that it's the anniversary this year, but it's also corresponding to our Pluto return. And it's just really interesting to see 250 years in that title. Now, if you haven't heard about this legislation, the 2026 blueprint aims to reverse the individualism of the 1960s, specifically mentioning that second wave feminism led to social decline. It continues to attack abortion rights, intent on criminalizing the delivery of abortion materials, i.e., abortion pills. It provides tax credits for early marriage and for women who are stay-at-home mothers. It attacks over-credentialization, like the time it takes to get a teaching degree or a master's degree, claiming it incentivizes people to delay marriage. It aims to stigmatize divorce with a goal to end no-fault divorce. Now, remember, I mentioned that the Heritage Foundation's sun is at 27 degrees of Aquarius, and here it is placed on the midheaven of this chart, and it's right on that eclipse degree, and it's squaring Uranus in the 12th house. Now, a friend of mine asked if this meant that the Heritage Foundation's influence on this administration will be eclipsed out during this eclipse. And that's a really good question, because that often happens when a planet is so near the eclipse degree. Something is eclipsed out. And will that happen? Maybe. One can only hope. I mean, the cross that we're heading into is about more individuation, not less. And my initial analysis of Project 2025 was that they were going to manifest the projects, but it wouldn't last because it was too extreme. America's spirit is very individualistic. We are diverse people, and we don't like the government messing in our personal lives. And once Uranus goes into Gemini, the energy for diversification will become even stronger. But you can clearly see the themes in this chart, with Mars and Venus conjunct exactly with the sun opposing Jupiter, and the moon in Virgo opposing Saturn and Neptune. But a lot of the planets and angles are in the last degrees, and that indicates that this energy or plan is at the end of its cycle. There's a do or die energy at critical degrees, so it will definitely be a fight, but I can't see them winning this fight as is designed currently. However, this plan was also published on the Human Design Cross of Penetration. So they are breaking ground, planting a seed for future fertilization. Peter Thiel was born on this cross, but on the Libra side, so in a square. And you see that the seed that he planted with Donald Trump broke the ground for this current tech power grab. So a friend of mine sent me this clip because I had been talking to her about this concept of seeding in relationship to Peter Thiel and his cross in human design. And sure enough, they talk about his connections to Epstein, and they use the phrase seeding, which is very synchronous again. And this is a podcast with Wajahat Ali and Gil Duran. And Gil Duran has been putting out some really great content about the Antichrist, which I've also talked about on my channel. I'll link it below. It's a fascinating topic, especially in relation to tech. which is very unusual and caught me off guard when I saw Peter Thiel talking about it.
And they wanted to meet him. He seated them, they seated him with these ideas. Speaking about seating, literally, did you hear that audio clip of Epstein telling the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, about Palantir and Peter Thiel?
So this planting of a seed is definitely something that we should watch develop over time. And I just want to clarify that I'm not against some of these initiatives like tax credits for families, but I think its focus is too narrow in defining who and what make up a healthy family. It also creeps into an area where women no longer have financial independence or control over their own decisions. When you look at history, there's a reason women fought for independence, and it wasn't freedom for the sake of freedom. Women were often held captive by abusive men. And if they didn't get married or became widowed, they had to rely on the kindness of their relatives who weren't always kind. And some were forced into prostitutions just so they could survive. And you can see how women are treated in other fundamentalist societies. I do not like the state involved in family planning, period. The Eclipse nodes are about leading by example. So many of these people who tout traditional values are not living the lives that they so hypocritically promote. I think their motivation is driven by fear and the lust for power and control more than anything else. So this eclipse definitely includes our conflicts with the rest of the world. I've talked about these conflicts in other episodes, and I'm not going to focus on them here, but the Saturn-Neptune conjunction will lead to breakthroughs and or collapses. And if we continue to be so aggressive with other countries, it may just lead to broader capital wars, as Ray Dalio suggests. So hang on to your hats. It's going to be another wild ride. I loved something Don Lemon said the days after his arrest. He said, I approach everything with the question, what can I learn from this situation? What does this situation offer me? So that every situation remains positive for me. And I love that framing because it makes a lot of sense. And I have Saturn at the top of my chart, so I can easily just kind of sink into cynicism and depression. I have to do a lot of work on my mental hygiene. It's an everyday practice. I meditate every day, and I can very easily fall into the cynicism watching what's going on around me. So I have to really work at it. And I'm not really good at the positivity movement, especially the way that some people approach it by repeating phrases and rah, 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 because it really needs to feel authentic to me. And so I love when somebody offers me something that feels authentic to me, a way to reframe a situation. And I'd like to offer you this. I think we should stop avoiding struggle, because it's often in the struggle that the magic happens. Like when I was young, I used to get so pissed off when somebody said that I couldn't do something. I was like, fuck you, I can do this and I'm going to prove it to you. And that fueled in me to prove something to myself, that I could do something. Now, the motivation might have been off, but it fueled something positive. So in that way, anger can fuel something positive if we just focus it in the right way. If we're just reacting to the negativity and reacting in a toxic way, it just feeds into that cycle. So watch how you're fueling that anger into positive actions, a way forward. And I would say the positive thing about this administration is that they're shoving their corruption right in our faces, their cruelty, they're shoving their cruelty right in our faces. We have no choice but to see it. And past administrations might have had corruption. They might have had cruelty, but a lot of people didn't see it. And so they were able to ignore it more easily. But now we can't ignore it. And in that way, we have to make a choice. We can either put our heads in the sand, or we can use it to create positive action in the country to make changes where we're seeing things go so out of line. We can take positive steps in our communities to create positive change. So I'd love to hear from you. How are you using this time, this lifting of the veil, to create positive change in the world?